It is the blackest page in the history of the War of Lost Cause. It was the bloodiest battle of modern times in any war. It was the finishing stroke to the independence of the Southern Confederacy. I was there. I saw it. My flesh trembles and creeps and crawls when I think of it today. So wrote Private Sam Watkins in his memoirs. Hi, I'm Joseph Kaler, and behind the camera is James Romeo here on RoadTripStory.com. And what Sam Watkins was referring to was what you're seeing behind you is the Battle of Franklin. Now, this battle was fought many years ago, November 30th, 1864. And unfortunately, what you saw today was a lot of modern development. But really, don't let that fool you. This really was the scene of one of the bloodiest battles, and not just American history, but really world history. Right here, what we're going to do today in this episode is go down here in the hill and really see to some really very important spots and just really see why this battle was so important to American history. And we're going to take you back to November 30th, 1864. This is Winstead Hill Park, which at 1864 was something a lot more important. This actually was the site of the Confederate Commanding General John Bell Hood's headquarters, situated here. So why Winstead Hill? Well, this actually overlooks really down in the valley of the Harpeth River, which is where the Battle of Franklin subsequently happened. And what he could see here was just all of his troop movements and just any type of attacks that were being made. So having this high ground was really key. And we're situated about 2 miles south of town. But really, how did he get here? That was really because of Spring Hill. And this is an engagement that happened the night before on November 29th, 1864. John Bell Hood really allowed the Union troops commanded by General John Schofield to really slip through one of the most contested episodes of the Civil War, very hotly debated by historians even today, of why an army let another army escape. And really enraged that Hood really drew up his battle plans at Spring Hill of the morning of November 30th and actually implemented them here at Winstead Hill. Hood didn't really bring these into the battle, which was really a tragic consequence for him. So really kind of almost a perfect storm, if you will, the frontal assault, no artillery, and really just another really, I think, catastrophic chain of events in Hood's campaign here of the invasion of Tennessee. And really what this culminated in, why Hood's here fighting in Franklin, not only at Spring Hill, what we just mentioned earlier, is this is more of a grander scheme of things of what he wanted to do was disrupt the supply line, but at the same rate, wanted to go up to Nashville and really knock out George Thomas's army that was really entrenched and conquered Nashville to take it off, and really even go east, maybe even go up to the Ohio River. And as historian James McPherson was quoted, it was a really good quote, that Hood's plans were really, of the whole campaign, was something that was really evolved from Never Never Land or La La Land. After Hood marched his men 2 miles over open terrain without artillery, they really kind of engaged here in this first area, which is the Federal first main line. This is before really the epicenter of the battle. And the one good thing, at least about the Battle of Franklin, that unfortunately it has a lot of it been lost to really just development and just modernization. You'll still find places like these markers that really denote where the action really was taking place. So really at 4 p.m., this is where the Battle of Franklin initiated. All this time we've been talking about the Confederate troops really moving into the city of Franklin. Well, really, where were the Union troops? They were actually firmly entrenched in, really on the outskirts of town. And after the Confederates initially broke through that center first line, they came here to this spot. And what ended up happening here at this spot right here, a very important spot in the Battle of Franklin in American history, more than anything else, I believe, is that 4 divisions under Hood were sent to really come here at this spot. And where this area is what was considered back then the Carter Cotton Gin. And some of the most horrific fighting in the Civil War was here. In fact, the battle was so really brutal that 6 generals were actually killed on the Confederate side. And one of them is actually memorialized right here at this park, which is General Patrick Cleburne. And really his loss to the Confederacy was a really devastating blow. In fact, it was so devastating, it was considered by a lot of historians the second greatest loss to the Confederate cause, second to that of Stonewall Jackson itself. So again, very important place in American history, and the Battle of Franklin, really the starting, the curtain of death, if you will, really began on this really bloody spot. It seemed to me that hell itself had exploded in our faces, later wrote a Confederate general regarding the Battle of Franklin. And at this scene at the Carter Gin House, some of those horrific fighting, fortunately you can't see that today, But really, fortunately, with some really great nonprofit organizations like the Civil War Battlefield Trust has actually gained this land, which used to be a former Pizza Hut that actually stood on the site of where General Claiborne was killed in battle, and they actually preserved it, at least for future generations, so that maybe that even my kids can enjoy seeing and maybe witnessing firsthand the spot of really a tragic part of American history.
Okay, now, hear that suction?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's ready and feels comfortable. He'll shake his head. The reason he's shaking his head is because of all the other cannons going off. The battlefield is so noisy that we can't communicate this far away. So I'm going to shake my head. When that happens, then you'll look back at the sergeant in charge.
I'm about to fire this. Only at Franklin. Do you know I'm firing for the Union? Take what I can get. I can't believe I'm doing this.
Okay.
Nice.
And that's all there is to it.
So this was was this canister shot or a form of it that we were shooting?
Form of it.
Form of it, yeah, not the true blue. Thank you, sir. Cool. There's really all kinds of reenactments you can go to, and this is one reason we picked Franklin on the weekend this week, and just because you can do this, you can fire a cannon, so very cool. Now, obviously, you can't talk about the Battle of Franklin without this, the Carter House. And we're about 100 yards roughly northwest of the Carter cotton gin where we just came from, and the Carter family really owned this area, which was Moscow Carter, and one of his sons, which was Todd Carter, actually was raised in this house. And unfortunately, he participated in the battle, Captain Todd Carter, and he died actually here in his own house. It's one of the more tragic episodes of the Civil War, but really brings back a thing of where, yes, this was the epicenter of the battle. There are thousands of men here just really fighting brutal hand-to-hand combat. But more importantly, the thing is here is Captain Todd Carter led a charge just no more than, I would say, 500 yards from his own house saying, "Follow me, boys, I'm coming home." And he unfortunately was mortally wounded during this battle, and he died. But again, it's, you know, men fighting overseas in wars, but here you see a young man that's fighting for his own country, and he dies in his own backyard, which is really one of the most, I think, tragic episodes of the American Civil War that really brings home not generals, not important politicians, but just regular soldiers, a person like you or me that's coming out fighting for your own country and, you know, dying on the land that you're trying to defend. Being here in the backyard, essentially, of the front yard of the Battle of Franklin itself at the Carter House here really gives you a sense of just seeing, not only with the bullet holes and things, you really get a sense of really urgency that the Union troops on the Union side, what they were doing preparing for this battle. They could see the Confederates 2 miles away coming at them slowly. Now, the Unions did have a lot of advantages. Namely, they dug in their defenses. They dug in various rifle pits, just you name it, in preparation for this battle. Schofield knew what he was getting into, but he was trying to really delay his men before they escaped and joined up with George Thomas at the battle of, subsequently the Battle of Nashville further north. But really the key thing is here is that the Carter House here was the epicenter of the Battle of Franklin in 5 hours from 4 p.m. to 9. Yes, 9 p.m., which is very rare for a Civil War battle to be at night. Vicious hand-to-hand fighting here. You have to remember, you're fighting, clubbing other men, trying to take men prisoners. There's smoke going off. There's cannons firing, canister shots. It's like gigantic shotguns going off into men. You don't know what's going on. It's just this total mass confusion that's not really ended until the day after the battle. And that's the reason why you have almost 10,000 men that are really, if not killed outright, or wounded, even 1,000 or so missing actually by the end of the day. So again, it's this battle is something that really needs to be remembered, and places like the Carter House, Carnton Plantation, what we saw at Winstead Hill are really poignant reminders of that. But again, of coming out here, seeing that struggle, it's just another experience when you actually come out here or you really see it yourself versus just a series of photographs. This bullet-riddled building is a very important building here at the Carter House. This is next to the main building, and what this actually is, this structure, is the farm office where Fountain Branch Carter would just do his daily activities regarding overseeing the farm. And what you're seeing here, like I said, is the actual bullets from the Battle of Franklin, November 30th, 1864. And just on this side alone, there's over 200 bullets. And the really big key takeaway I want you guys to come here if you ever see Battle of Franklin, the sites, and especially this just really important national landmark here, is noting that this building right here is still the best, war damaged structure that's still remaining from the American Civil War. So again, just a lot of history all here in one place, but really not even so much of just this wall. Not only was the Carter House the epicenter of the battle, which when the Union had this fortified essentially with trenches and just having parapets and just any defensive measure thrown against the Confederates. Confederates actually overtook this, and during the battle, after the battle, the city of Franklin actually was reconquered, if you will, by the Confederates, who took the field as Schofield's army at the night of the 30th actually broke loose and escaped towards Nashville. But more importantly, after the battle itself, the Confederacy was left with a victory, but at staggering cost, or thousands of men just lying bleeding, wounded, dying on the battlefield, and a lot of them ended up in being makeshift field hospitals like the Carter House here. And why I'm showing you this spot is that this is very famous spot at the Carter House where, this being used as a field hospital, surgeons would actually hack off arms, limbs, because you got to remember the type of bullets, the ammunition that were used during the Civil War would go through an arm and just shatter the bone. So it's going to be easier then to saw off the arm or to saw off the leg. Really, is going to be your best, your best medicine. Maybe a little bit of whiskey, cauterize the wound, and that's going to be it. But what I was saying here is this field hospital there were so many amputations that right here it's been said that legs and arms were piled up to about as high as the window over my head, and I'm about 5'9", and over my head just full of limbs. So again, just the staggering numbers here at Franklin I want you to take away from this 5-hour battle of just, not only just what you saw or heard about the numbers in the battle, but the after effects with the amputations and just seeing these horrific scenes long after the battle was ended. No tour of the Franklin battlefield would be complete without going to the Lotz House here. Now you got to remember that we've been talking all the time about the South End, and we're actually very close to the Carter House. In fact, we're kind of diagonally across from it. I'd say about maybe 50 yards right up the road, more closer to downtown Franklin. And this house also saw some really, really severe fighting, hand-to-hand combat, just kind of what we witnessed and saw at the Carter House. Not going to see really the bullet holes or things like that, but you are going to see a really nice house. Now the tour, unfortunately, they won't allow you to do videos or take pictures inside, but it's really a really beautiful type of antebellum home that was actually purchased from the Carter, the same Fountain Branch Carter that we saw earlier at the Carter House. Actually, he owned a good bit of this land, and I would say most of the battlefield of Franklin, a good majority of it was fought on his property. The Lotz House, though, since he bought this a little bit before the Civil War, he was just basically the Lotz family there, just kind of just carpentry. He was a piano maker as well, Albert Lotz was. But more so than anything else, though, during the battle that was raging on, they were so scared that this battle was going to be so horrific, which they're right. They're fearing actually that the house were going to burn down, so they took refuge actually in the cellar and the basement at the Carter House, diagonally across the street. So again, just another little piece of really what makes Franklin complete. And even though, again, it's private, you can really still get a sense of just, again, this type of battle that enraged, and you get to see it from multiple perspectives. Carnton, Carter, and now the Lotz House. Confederate Colonel Gale, writing to his wife shortly after the battle, described the scene here at Carnton Plantation. The wounded in hundreds were brought to Carnton during the battle and all the night after. Every room was filled. Every bed had 2 poor fellows. Every square space, every niche, and every corner under the stairs, in the hall, everywhere. But one room saved for the family. And when the noble old house could hold no more, the yard was appropriated until the wounded and dead filled that. This was very, very much a bloody scene of the American Civil War. But what's interesting to note about Carnton Plantation, where we are, one of the very famous landmark of the battlefield of Franklin, is that this really wasn't a part of the battlefield. It's actually a divisional hospital. And kind of talking about that civilian front and seeing just everyday life. Well, after a battle, what's going to happen? You have wounded men, sick men, people that are just dying. And in this household, you saw about the first night of November 30th, 1864, about 300 men dead or dying already inside the house. And by the time this campaign's over, even long after Hood's retreated, this lawn, this property is just full of dead and dying Confederate men. And you're going to see this story alongside other important stories here at Carnton Plantation. One of the most interesting features of Carnton Plantation is here on the back porch. And by the early hours the day after the Battle of Franklin, the bodies of 4 dead Confederate generals were actually lying right here. If you can imagine that. Your commander is just laid out here among 3 of his other commanders as well, including Patrick Claiborne, who we just saw recently in the video as well, where the spot where he was killed. So just another one of the many facets of Carnton Plantation that just makes it a little chilling, but at the same rate, just so real in the mindset of just trying to grasp and understand the history of the battlefield of Franklin. One of my favorite things about the plantation itself is not so much the grounds or the Confederate cemetery, but actually touring inside the home. A lot of times you won't have a chance to really visit the stories and really just the actual rooms where, you know, in this case, history being made, with it being like a field hospital. Now, unfortunately, in this tour, they won't allow videos or photography. So for that, we're, going to respect them and we weren't going to be sneaky or anything like that, but I just came out of the tour and wow. The biggest key takeaway I want you guys to remember here of the Battle of Franklin is this battle ended almost 150 years ago. It's coming up on the anniversary, and you can still see blood stains on the floor from where the hospital, it was a makeshift hospital that was being used to saw, doing medical work, whatever. And that's a really big takeaway here that I want you to know. In Carnton Plantation, there's still places like the Carter House with bullet holes at the farm office and in here on the floors. So really, it's literal history that you're walking on. The other landmark of Carnton Plantation that you guys may or may not know is this, the McGavock Confederate Cemetery. This actually is the largest Confederate cemetery and also the largest private military cemetery in the United States. The War Department never took care of this, the Veterans Administration. This was just a private citizen, and that citizen was Colonel John McGavock, who owned Carnton Plantation, saw really the deterioration of the graves at the Franklin site around the Franklin area, and really ordered 2 acres of his property in front of Carnton Plantation to actually be the final resting place for over 1,000 Confederate soldiers. So a lot of these men that are falling today that you see here, their graves actually participated in the horrific Battle of Franklin. And these are assigned, you can see this large monument here, they're actually assigned by states. So you really get to see a sense of, you might even have an ancestor buried here, or just the amount of men that died here. Mississippi actually had the most casualties of any state. But to me, it's just incredible that anyone got out of this unscathed. But unfortunately, almost 10,000 men didn't, and either were wounded in the form of that or even missing to this day. They just don't know what happened to them, presumed dead, obviously, after 150 years. But you see here at the cemetery really kind of a chilling, really a final resting place of the men that fought at the Battle of Franklin. Standing beside the grave of Carrie McGavock, who was really instrumental in making Carnton Plantation really a refuge for a lot of the dying and sick soldiers that she really tended to. Her dress or dresses in the ensuing days, weeks of the battle were just, I wouldn't even imagine the clothing she had, but her dress, at least the first night, was rumored to have just soaked with blood from all the soldiers. I'm sure she was just covered, but a very proud woman, and she lived on well into the Victorian era, as it shows here on her grave. She was actually written in a New York Times best-selling novel, The Widow of the South, but more importantly, in real life, in history, this woman was very important. She's tied in forever with Carnton. And again, this is the part of the cemetery, this is the family cemetery, whereas we're just came back from the Confederate cemetery, but this woman is very important and very crucial piece to ensuring that really the fate and the memory and the lives of a lot of Confederate soldiers, officers, enlisted men, whoever, were really ensured that they were going to live and, more importantly, be remembered for a long time. So thank you, Carrie. Night is starting to fall here in Franklin, and you have to remember at the battle when it didn't end until 9 p.m., way after it was really, really dark. And with November being one of the shortest times of the year, you have to remember the carnage that was going on even long after the sun went down. And this town, I'm in the epicenter of the town square here in Franklin. You have to remember that a lot of these buildings that, at least that we're seeing behind us and around here today, were converted to field hospitals, areas for the sick and the wounded. Thousands of men, just upon thousands that had to have legs amputated, just being looked after. And just the really key takeaway here that I want you guys to see is that not only that battles happen the day of, but you got to remember that some of these soldiers, from what I've read about, didn't leave this area until months and months way after the battle ended. Finally, that could go home, Confederate or Union. So, hope you guys liked the video regarding the Battle of Franklin. Again, the key takeaway here that I guys want you to remember is just how brutal and how just ruthless the fighting was here in this little spot of land in the United States of America on November 30th, 1864. You had about 10,000 people in just a few square miles that were just killed outright, wounded, generals, regular soldiers, men that were tied together with this land, and really just forever changed the nation, as well as Franklin, Tennessee itself. So this has been really one of the most interesting stories that I've done for Road Trip Story, and for roadtripstory.com. This is Joseph Kaler, behind the camera, James Romeo. We bid you farewell, and we'll see you on down the road. So imagine a whole row of Navy gunships in 1865, 58 of them in all, bombarding this island. That's exactly what happened.